Hello and welcome to World History B, Unit 9, the Israel-Palestine conflict. Okay, so after the Cold War, America's many conflicts with the Middle East began to become more and more of a focus for America, now that there was no other potential enemy to deal with. But conflicts with the Middle East aren't as simple as with the Soviet Union, because not everybody in the Middle East is against us. There are many sides, there are many conflicts, there are many reasons to fight between the variety of players in that area that it makes it very difficult to figure out what winning even means. One conflict in particular is the Israeli-Palestine conflict. After World War II, just as the Cold War was beginning to get started, in 1947 the United Nations voted for the division of Palestine into a Palestinian state and a Jewish state. Now, right here is that area that we're talking about when we're talking about Israel and Palestine. And Israel was given most of this area in the green, and Palestine was supposed to have this shaded area. Then Jerusalem, right there in the middle, that was supposed to be the international holy city that is owned by neither side and is kind of operated independently. But this separation wasn't one that both sides agreed to. It was forced by the UN, and many other nations of the Middle East made clear that they did not appreciate the United Nations coming in and just establishing a new government for a type of people that was not of the majority faith in the Middle East, which is predominantly Muslim. And so the day after Israel became a state, 6 other Islamic nations, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and Syria, invaded Israel. Israel, however, was able to defend itself quite well, and not only did it defend itself, but it aggressively took more land than the UN originally was going to allow it. That's what this Sinai Peninsula area is right here. This would have been predominantly Egypt and Jordanian territory, and Israel had expanded all the way into this area, and they had taken most of the Palestinian area as well. Now, after that conflict, of course, those nations wanted that land back. They didn't want Israel to be there in the first place, but to see this land that was taken by them, not even given to them, meant that they would be coming back, that there would be further wars. Anwar Sadat, who was the Egyptian ruler in the 1970s, initiated what's known as the Yom Kippur War with Israel in 1973. Why Yom Kippur? He was trying to take advantage of the fact that Yom Kippur is the holiest of Jewish holidays, kind of like our Christmas, and that they would be vulnerable because people would be spending time with their families and not exactly expecting a major invasion from two sides. As you can see from the graphic here, Egypt, which initiated the war, had allied with Syria, so that while Egypt invaded from the west, Syria invaded from the east, forcing Israel into a two-front war. The Prime Minister of Israel during this war was Golda Meir, and while she was taken by surprise, she was also able to launch a massive counterattack and recovered most of the territory that Egypt had taken in the initial strike. And after weeks of fighting, Israel and Egypt finally agreed to a truce. Now, the final result of this conflict was no change as far as territories were concerned. However, both sides recognized that there probably would never be any more gains or losses. There would just be more killing. Israel realized that they were no longer the most powerful military in the area and were no longer going to be able to be aggressive and take more land. Egypt, meanwhile, realized that while they were the stronger force, they didn't quite have the power to push Israel out of the Sinai Peninsula, and so both sides began to open up and talk about peace. And in 1977, Anwar Sadat went before the Knesset, the Israel parliament, and invited Israel to join him in a quest for peace. And in 1979, the Camp David Accords were signed, which ended 30 years of hostilities between Egypt and Israel and became the first signed agreement between Israel and an Arab country, which is significant because up until this point, no Arab country recognized Israel as a true state. They looked at them as occupiers, not their own nation. This is the first time that an Arab state, Egypt, began to change their position on that matter. However, Peace with Egypt, while a huge victory for Israel's future security, they still had many, many enemies, including Palestinians living inside of Israel, feeling like they were being occupied unjustly. And this feeling gave birth to the Palestine Liberation Organization, which was formed in 1964, and his goal was the formation of a Palestinian state. Because remember, Israel had taken most of Palestine's land away from them in that first war. And the PLO initially was made up of teachers, lawyers, laborers, and guerrilla fighters trying to stage a true revolution from the ground up and reclaim lands that had been held by Arabs for the past 2,000 years up until the UN allowed Israel to claim land for itself. However, while its intentions were initially good and understandable, in 1969, Yasser Arafat became the chairman of the PLO. And as he oversaw the group, it carried out many attacks against Israel, including terrorist attacks. What once started out as more of an intellectual revolution quickly became a very violent one, and one that would encourage most of Western Europe and America to side with Israel and Israel's continued control over the lands it had taken over from that first war in the 1940s. And since then, the conflict between Israel and Palestine has never really ended. While the PLO was mostly operating from the outside as far as its leadership was concerned, from the inside, many Palestinians began to express their frustrations in a campaign of civil disobedience called the Intifada, or uprising. This included boycotts, demonstrations, attacks on Israeli soldiers, and rock throwing by otherwise unarmed teenagers, protesting what they felt was an occupation which made them feel like refugees in what should be their homeland. The Oslo Peace Accords were an attempt to grant the Palestinians self-rule in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. But as you can see from the map, this didn't quite play out. All of this area within the black borders here is all supposed to be controlled by Palestine. This is the Palestinian state. But as you can see from the green and some of the white, only some of it, maybe half, a little less than that, is actually officially controlled by Palestine, because Israel isn't quite ready to give up their control either. So while the Oslo Peace Accord did create kind of a temporary peace, it didn't last, because Israel was still not quite ready to give up the fight to completely control the entire area with no Palestinians, because Israel had gotten used to controlling the entire area and looking at Palestinians as their guests rather than equals and full participants in the government. And Palestine, meanwhile, continued to fight for its independence, for its freedom, its liberation from, again, what it felt was an occupying force. And as a result of the Oslo Peace Accords and many attempts for peace afterwards, this would not be the last intifada or public uprising on behalf of the Palestinians. And that's all the time we have for this video. If you have any questions, let me know in class. Thank you.